I knew something was wrong before I even pulled into the driveway. You ever get that feeling where your stomach tightens for no reason? Like your body notices trouble before your brain catches up? Yeah, that was me halfway down Briarwood Lane, staring at flashing blue pool lights bouncing off the side of my garage, like some Vegas hotel had landed in the middle of our quiet little neighborhood. I remember slowing the truck down and just sitting there for a second, engine running, suitcase still in the passenger seat, trying to process what I was looking at because where my backyard used to be, there was water. Not a kiddie pool, not some inflatable thing for summer. I'm talking a full-on luxury resort setup. Stone decking, built-in waterfall, lounge chairs, music playing, and strangers drinking margaritas 10 feet from the oak tree my father planted before he died. The craziest part? Nobody even looked guilty. A woman in sunglasses was floating on one of those giant swan things like she paid property taxes there. Some guy I'd never seen before waved at me like I was arriving late to the party. And standing near the deep end with a drink in his hand was my neighbor, Damian Cross, smiling that smug country club smile he always wore whenever he thought he'd outsmarted somebody. Now, Damian had money. Everybody knew that. He owned 3 car dealerships outside Nashville and spent half his life reminding people he built himself from nothing, which usually translated to treating everybody else like background noise. About 2 years before all this happened, he bought the house next to mine. Massive modern place, black windows, concrete walls, looked less like a home and more like an expensive dentist office. The first week he moved in, he complained my lawnmower was too loud. Then he complained about my dog barking. Then the leaves from my oak tree falling near his patio furniture. Every conversation with him felt like he was filing a lawsuit with his face. Still, I never thought he'd pull something like this. I got out of the truck and walked toward the fence, except there barely was a fence anymore because half of it had been removed. My boots hit fresh concrete, and Damian turned around like he'd been expecting me. "There he is," he said, raising his drink. "Back from vacation." I looked around again. What the hell is this? And this man, I swear to God, laughed. Not nervous laughter either. Real laughter. Like I just asked something adorable. "Oh, relax, Ethan," he said. "It's a shared improvement project. Honestly, your property value probably doubled." I remember blinking at him because my brain couldn't even catch up to the level of arrogance coming out of his mouth. "You built a pool on my land." He shrugged. Technically, the survey lines were unclear. "No," I said, pointing at the stone edge cutting through my yard. "They were crystal clear." That's when his smile changed a little. Less friendly. More irritated that I wasn't reacting the way he expected. "Listen," he said quietly, stepping closer. "You never even used this part of the yard." That hit me harder than it should have because he was pointing directly at the corner where my dad used to sit every morning drinking coffee after my mom passed. Same corner where we buried my old golden retriever, Scout. To Damian, it was just in used grass. To me, it was memory. I told him he had exactly 24 hours to fix it before I got the city involved. He smirked. "Go ahead." Turns out, he already knew how that call was going to go. The next morning, I spent 3 hours bouncing between zoning offices, permit departments, and one exhausted city employee named Linda, who looked like she hadn't slept since 2009. Apparently, Damian's contractor submitted expansion plans while I was out of town, and somewhere between rushed approvals and lazy oversight, nobody properly verified the property boundary before concrete got poured. "You'll probably have to settle this privately," Linda told me over the phone in the saddest voice imaginable. "At this stage, it's considered a civil dispute." A civil dispute. That phrase kept bouncing around in my head while I stood at my kitchen window watching strangers cannonball into a pool sitting on top of my property. And Damian? He acted like he'd already won. Every evening became a performance next door. Music, pool lights, laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Expensive steaks on the grill. You could practically smell his ego cooking from across the fence line. A couple neighbors even started complimenting him about upgrading the block, which honestly made me feel crazier than the pool itself. Then one morning, while staring at the mess with a cup of coffee in my hand, I noticed something strange behind the retaining wall near the back edge of the pool, a narrow strip of untouched land the contractors never covered. About 4 feet wide, still technically mine. And right there, I noticed the runoff. That's when the idea hit me. Not all at once. More like a slow little spark in the back of my mind. Because Damian understood appearances. But he didn't understand nature. At first, I honestly wasn't trying to start a war. People always assume revenge comes from rage, but most of the time it comes from exhaustion. I was tired. Tired of arguing with offices that didn't care, tired of listening to Damien's pool parties every night, tired of watching a man bulldoze through boundaries because he thought money automatically turned wrong into temporary inconvenience. So instead of fighting louder, I got quieter. That little strip of land behind the pool became my evening project. Every night after work, I'd head out there with an old shovel, a wheelbarrow, and a flashlight clipped to my belt. No contractors, no permits, no giant machinery announcing itself to the neighborhood. Just dirt, patience, and time. At first, the neighbors probably thought I was gardening or fixing drainage. Damien definitely didn't care enough to ask. He was too busy hosting what sounded like auditions for a reality TV show every weekend. But I was paying attention. The runoff from his infinity pool naturally collected near the back corner of my property. The soil stayed damp even during dry days, and once I started digging deeper, I realized there was a shallow underground spring feeding through the clay underneath. Tiny trickles at first, but steady, clean, constant. My grandfather used to build small fishing ponds back in Kentucky when I was a kid, and somewhere buried deep in my memory, all those lessons started crawling back up. Water always finds somewhere to belong, so I gave it a place. Within 2 weeks, the little trench became a pond. Then the pond became something bigger. I lined parts of it with river stones I found cheap online, planted cattails and native grasses around the edges, added a small solar fountain for circulation, and built a shaded nesting area using reclaimed cedar boards from my old shed. Nothing flashy. Honestly, it looked more peaceful than expensive, real instead of polished. Then came the sign, Wildlife Restoration Zone. I hammered it into the ground one Saturday morning while Damien was hosting another one of his casual brunch parties, which in Damien language meant 12 overdressed adults pretending to enjoy cucumber water beside an over-chlorinated pool. One of the women actually stopped sipping her mimosa long enough to stare at my sign like I'd opened a landfill next door. I just smiled and kept planting lilies. 3 days later, the ducks arrived. Not a huge dramatic flock either. Just 2 mallards gliding into the pond around sunrise while I drank coffee on the porch. I remember laughing out loud because it felt ridiculous at first. They paddled around like they'd signed a lease agreement overnight. One of them climbed onto a rock near the edge and just sat there blinking at me like, yeah, this'll work. By the end of the week, there were 6. And that's when Damien finally noticed. He walked over one afternoon wearing loafers that probably cost more than my truck payment and stared at the pond with this expression like somebody had spray-painted graffiti on his living room wall. What exactly is this supposed to be, he asked. I leaned on the shovel. Habitat restoration. You built a swamp. It's a pond. It smells. I looked around dramatically. That's weird. Smells like outside to me. His jaw tightened instantly. Damien wasn't used to people talking back to him unless they were quitting. You're doing this on purpose, he said. No, I answered calmly. I'm using my property. That line hit him harder than I expected. For a second, he didn't even speak. He just stood there staring at me because we both knew exactly what I meant. Then the ducks started multiplying. Apparently, once ducks decide a place feels safe, they tell their friends. Within another couple weeks, I had geese stopping by, turtles sunning themselves on rocks, dragonflies skimming the water at sunset. Kids from farther down the street started riding bikes over just to look at the pond. One little girl named Ava called it the fairy lake, which honestly made my entire month. Meanwhile, Damien's luxury pool slowly transformed into the world's most expensive duck waiting room. Feathers drifted into the water constantly. Ducks waddled across his stone deck like they paid HOA fees there. Every morning around sunrise, they'd start quacking loud enough to echo across the neighborhood. And the funniest part? They absolutely loved sitting near the infinity edge because the water flow attracted bugs. Damien lost his mind. At first, he tried staying polite for appearances. Hey, buddy, he said one morning with fake calmness. Any chance you could relocate some of the wildlife? I nearly choked on my coffee. Relocate wildlife. Yeah, this is becoming disruptive. You mean nature? I mean pests. Now, here's the thing about people like Damien. They love nature when it's printed on wallpaper or framed in expensive vacation photos. But actual nature? Mud, feathers, noise, unpredictability. That ruins the aesthetic. And his aesthetic was collapsing fast. His guests started showing up less often. One afternoon, I overheard a woman by the fence whisper, "Are those mosquitoes?" Like she'd discovered medieval plague conditions. Another guy slipped on duck droppings near the shallow end and almost launched himself into a decorative fire pit. I had to walk back inside because I was laughing too hard. Damien escalated after that. First came ultrasonic animal repellents. Little black devices stuck around the pool, emitting high-frequency noise. Didn't work. The ducks ignored them completely. Then came motion sprinklers, which mostly ended up spraying his own guests. One poor guy in white linen got blasted in the chest carrying a charcuterie board and looked seconds away from crying. After that, Damien hired a wildlife control specialist. I'll never forget that conversation. The guy pulled up in an old pickup truck, stepped out chewing sunflower seeds, looked at my pond, looked at Damien's pool, then sighed the sigh of a man who already knew he wasn't getting paid enough. "You got water?" he told Damien. "Yes, obviously. And he's got better water." Damien blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means ducks ain't stupid." I almost applauded. Things got really ugly after that because Damien stopped pretending to be civil. One night, I caught him shining bright floodlights directly toward the pond. Another time he complained to the HOA that my unregulated ecosystem was lowering neighborhood luxury appeal, which was hilarious considering he literally built half a resort illegally across my property line. But the moment I realized he was actually panicking happened during his 4th of July party. That night he'd hired a bartender, a DJ, even synchronized lights inside the pool. The whole backyard looked like a commercial for rich people with unresolved childhood issues. Around 30 guests showed up. Expensive dresses, cigars, loud laughing, the usual. Then right in the middle of his big fireworks finale, a mother duck marched across the pool deck with 7 ducklings behind her. I swear to you the entire party went silent. The DJ actually lowered the music. One tiny duckling slipped into the shallow tanning ledge and started paddling in circles while everybody just stared. Damien looked like his soul temporarily left his body, and standing there watching him melt down under his own luxury patio lights. I finally understood something. This stopped being about the land weeks ago. For Damien, the pool was never just a pool. It was a trophy, proof he could take space, reshape it, control it, improve it. Guys like him think ownership means domination. But nature doesn't care about dominance. And sooner or later, neither does the truth. About a month after the ducklings crashed Damien's 4th of July party, the city finally came back out. Not because of me. That's the part people always love. I didn't sue him. I didn't threaten anybody. I didn't go viral online or start some neighborhood Facebook war. Damien did what arrogant people always do eventually. He overplayed his hand. One of his contractors filed paperwork for an additional patio extension near the back fence, and that triggered a fresh inspection request through the county. Different inspector this time. Older guy named Walter. Quiet. The kind of man who looks like he trusts tape measures more than human beings. The second Walter stepped into the yard, I knew Damien was in trouble. He kept frowning at the layout, walking back and forth, measuring angles twice, looking down at old survey markers buried near the oak tree. Damien followed him around, trying way too hard to sound casual. "There was some confusion during the original build," he kept saying. "But we worked everything out privately." Walter barely acknowledged him. That man spent nearly 3 hours out there measuring every inch of the property line, while Damien slowly sweated through a golf shirt that probably cost $200. Meanwhile, I sat on my porch drinking iced tea beside the pond while ducks floated around like they'd been hired as emotional support animals. At one point, Walter walked over to me and asked, "You the original owner?" 10 years now. He nodded toward the pool. "You ever sign an easement agreement?" "Nope." That was the moment Damien's face changed. You could actually see the panic finally break through the confidence. Up until then, I honestly think he believed money alone could smooth everything over forever. But standing there watching an inspector quietly redraw lines on an official map, reality finally started pressing back. 2 days later, the notice showed up. Partial structural removal required due to unlawful encroachment. Turns out the pool extended almost 11 feet onto my property in certain sections, way more than anyone originally admitted. The retaining wall violated drainage codes too, which explained why runoff kept collecting behind it. The city gave Damien 90 days to remove the encroaching portion and restore proper boundary compliance. He lost his mind. I came home one evening and found him standing near the fence waiting for me like a man preparing for a duel. "You think this is funny?" he snapped before I even got out of the truck. I set my keys in my pocket slowly. "Not really. Expensive, though." His face turned red instantly. "You could have stopped this." I actually laughed at that. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because the audacity genuinely caught me off guard. "I could have stopped you from building a pool on my property. You knew there were mistakes." "No, Damien," I said quietly. "You knew there were mistakes. You just thought nobody would push back hard enough to matter." For a second, he looked like he wanted to say something honest. Maybe apologize. Maybe admit he crossed a line. But ego's a weird thing. Some people would rather drown defending their pride than climb onto solid ground. So instead, he looked past me toward the pond. This whole duck thing was childish. I turned and looked at the water too. By then the pond had fully settled into itself. Tall grasses swayed in the evening breeze. Frogs chirped after sunset. The oak tree reflected across the surface like something out of an old painting. Honestly, the backyard felt alive again. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I built mine on my own land." That one landed. He stared at me another second, then walked away without another word. The demolition started 3 weeks later. And man, if you've never watched rich people concrete get jackhammered at 7 in the morning, let me tell you something. It's incredibly therapeutic. Huge sections of the infinity edge came out first, then part of the stone deck. Then the waterfall feature disappeared entirely because the plumbing crossed the corrected property line. For the first time since Damien moved into the neighborhood, his house looked unfinished. Human. The party stopped after that. No more DJs. No more late-night lights flashing through my windows. No more fake laughter echoing over the fence every weekend. Sometimes I'd still see Damien outside pacing around with contractors, pointing at revised blueprints like a man trying to negotiate with gravity itself. But he never spoke to me again after that conversation near the fence. And honestly, I didn't hate him anymore. That surprised me the most. Somewhere during all of it, the anger, the noise, the inspections, the ducks, I realized the land was never really the issue either. What bothered me most was how easily somebody could walk into another person's life and assume their memories didn't matter because they weren't profitable. That corner of the yard wasn't empty to me. It held my father's mornings, my dog's grave, pieces of my life nobody else could measure on a survey map. And weirdly enough, the pond gave that space back. These days I wake up early most mornings and sit on the porch with coffee while the ducks glide across the water. Ava still rides over on her bike, sometimes to feed them cracked corn with her little brother. The neighborhood got quieter too. Slower. More real. As for Damien, his pool's still there, technically. Just smaller now. Awkward looking, honestly. Like a luxury watch missing half its face. Every once in a while I catch him staring toward the pond with this expression I can't fully read. Maybe resentment. Maybe embarrassment. Maybe he's still trying to understand how he lost a war against ducks. Or maybe, deep down, he finally understands something most people learn too late. You can build fast. You can build expensive. You can even build over other people if nobody stops you. But eventually, truth settles exactly where it belongs. And sometimes, it settles with feathers. If you made it this far, let me ask you something. If somebody crossed a line like this with you, would you have handled it peacefully like Ethan did? Or would you have gone straight to court? And be honest, did Damien deserve what happened to him? Or did the duck pond go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this always split people right down the middle.